Bullies pick on the new black kid, panic when he fights back, like a pro. The cafeteria fell silent. Malcolm Wright had barely pushed his chair back when Ryan Calloway's smirk twisted into something meaner, something sharper. His voice cut through the air, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Oh, so now you're gonna do something, huh? Thought you were just gonna sit there and take it, Mercer." Malcolm didn't blink. His hands rested at his sides, relaxed, controlled. He could hear the whispers rippling across the cafeteria, the scrape of trays being pulled closer, the quiet shuffling of students leaning in for a better look. Ryan was still grinning, still playing to his audience. Behind him, Zach and Brandon flanked him like loyal attack dogs, their amusement evident. Malcolm took a slow breath, his father's voice echoing in his mind. "You don't fight with anger. You fight with control." Ryan reached out, aiming to shove him again, but Malcolm moved first. Before Ryan's hands could even make contact, Malcolm's left hand shot up, gripping Ryan's wrist with a precision that froze the entire room. His right hand clamped down on Ryan's elbow. And then, with effortless speed, he pivoted, shifting his weight, using Ryan's own force against him. Ryan's feet left the ground. The entire cafeteria watched in stunned silence as Ryan slammed onto the floor, his back hitting the tiles with a dull, painful thud. He gasped, stunned, blinking up at the ceiling as if trying to process how he had just gone from standing to lying on the floor in under 2 seconds. His two friends lurched forward, but Malcolm didn't even acknowledge them. Instead, he crouched down next to Ryan, voice low, calm, almost casual. "Don't touch me again." He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. But somehow that made it worse, because Malcolm wasn't trying to prove a point. He wasn't trying to show off. He was simply done playing their game. Ryan lay there, breath coming out in uneven pants, eyes darting around as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Malcolm stood, dusted off his hands, and without another glance walked away. The silence stretched. Then, somewhere in the back of the cafeteria, a voice whispered, "Holy sh!" And just like that, the floodgates opened. 6 hours earlier, Malcolm had stepped through the front doors of Redwood High for the first time. Everything about the school felt too clean, too polished, too perfect. The walls gleamed under bright fluorescent lights, the glass windows reflected the world with surgical precision, and the hallways stretched out like carefully curated magazine spreads. It wasn't like his old school in Atlanta, where the walls were covered in student murals, where the air buzzed with energy, where people felt real. Here, everything felt controlled, measured. His mother had called this move a fresh start. His father, always more direct, had called it a necessary change. Malcolm wasn't sure what to call it yet, but the moment he walked through those front doors, he could feel it. People were looking, not staring. That would be too obvious. But the glances, the quick whispers, the way some students eyed him from head to toe before turning away, it all said the same thing. Who's this guy? Malcolm knew that feeling well. It wasn't curiosity, it was assessment. He adjusted his backpack and moved toward the front office, keeping his expression neutral. He had nothing to prove. After collecting his schedule from the overly polite receptionist, he stepped back into the hallway. That's when he noticed them. Ryan Calloway, the blonde hair, the designer sneakers, the casual arrogance in his stance. He stood near the lockers, flanked by two other guys, Zach Reynolds and Brandon Tate. They weren't loud, but they didn't need to be. The way they leaned against the lockers, the calculated laughter, the subtle nods toward students who passed by. It all screamed, "This is our territory." And Malcolm, he was trespassing. Ryan's gaze locked onto his, sharp and considering. He didn't speak, not yet. But Malcolm had seen that look before. Ryan was deciding whether Malcolm was worth messing with. And Malcolm already knew the answer. Ryan smirked, leaned toward one of his friends, and muttered something low enough that Malcolm couldn't hear. The two guys chuckled, glancing at him a little too long. Malcolm exhaled through his nose and walked past them. He wasn't here to entertain them. But the thing about guys like Ryan, they didn't like being ignored. By the time Malcolm reached the cafeteria at lunch, he already knew how things worked at Redwood High. The athletes ran things. The rich kids acted like royalty, and everyone else just existed. Malcolm didn't belong to either group. He wasn't loud, he wasn't looking for trouble, but he also wasn't timid, and that alone made him stand out. And Ryan hated that. It started small. A shoulder bump in the hallway that wasn't accidental, a mocking, "Watch where you're going," muttered just loud enough for Malcolm to hear. A notebook knocked off his desk in history class. Each time Ryan waited for a reaction. Each time Malcolm gave him nothing. Then came the comments. "Didn't know they let kids from the hood in here." "Mercer, you ever think about trying out for football? I mean, you people are good at that, right? Man, you're quiet. No smart comebacks. I thought you guys were supposed to be funny." Ryan never said it outright in front of a teacher. It was always just low enough that the wrong person could dismiss it as a joke, just subtle enough that he could shrug and play innocent if someone called him out. And the others, they laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to make Malcolm's hands tighten into fists under his desk. He thought about telling his dad, but he already knew the response. Handle it with discipline. Don't stoop to their level. And his mom? She'd worry. She'd tell him to talk to a teacher. But Malcolm knew better. The school wasn't going to punish one of its star athletes over something they couldn't prove. So Malcolm ignored it. At least that was the plan. Until Ryan made his biggest mistake. And now Ryan Calloway was lying flat on his back in the middle of the cafeteria, gasping for air. Malcolm didn't throw a single punch, didn't raise his voice, didn't even break a sweat. And yet, he had just humiliated the most powerful kid in school, in front of everyone. As Malcolm walked away, he could already hear it. The whispers, the text messages, the footage being sent from one phone to another. And Ryan wasn't just beaten. He was dismissed. But Malcolm knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Ryan Calloway didn't show up to school on Monday. By Tuesday, he still wasn't there. By Wednesday, the whispers had reached every hallway, every classroom, every corner of Redwood High. "Did you hear? Ryan didn't come back. Dude, I heard his dad is furious, like he's trying to get Malcolm expelled. I swear, I saw the video 10 times. Ryan didn't even land a hit. It was over before it even started." Malcolm walked through the halls, aware of every glance, every quiet murmur, every shift in energy when he entered a room. Some people nodded at him now, others stepped out of his way. And some, especially the ones who had laughed along with Ryan, pretended he didn't exist. Malcolm didn't care. He wasn't here to make friends. But he knew how this worked. Guys like Ryan didn't take humiliation lightly. They didn't just accept a loss and move on. They waited. They plotted. They made sure that when they got even, it was worth it. Malcolm had seen it before. And he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. He was sitting in his English class when Ava Sinclair dropped into the seat next to him. Ava wasn't part of Ryan's circle, but she wasn't an outsider either. She was the kind of person who had enough social currency to move through different groups without getting tied down to any of them. Smart, confident, a little too observant for Malcolm's liking. She set her notebook on the desk, glanced at him, and smirked. "You know you didn't just beat Ryan, right?" Malcolm didn't look up from his paper. "Yeah? What else did I do?" "You humiliated him." He sighed, tapping his pen against his notebook. "I didn't humiliate him. I just ended it." Ava shook her head. "No, see, if you had fought him, If you had thrown punches and rolled around on the ground, he could have spun it, made it seem like a fair fight. But you didn't. You put him down in 2 seconds and walked away like he was nothing. She leaned back in her chair, studying him. That's worse for him. Malcolm finally looked up. And why do you care? Ava shrugged. I don't, but I also know how this school works. Ryan's dad is on the school board. You think he's gonna let this slide? He met her gaze, steady and unreadable. Does it look like I care? She exhaled, shaking her head. You should. Then she grabbed her bag and walked off, like they hadn't just had the most interesting conversation of the day. Malcolm watched her go, jaw tightening slightly. He didn't like her being right, but she was. That night he got the first text message. Unknown. You think you're tough. Unknown. You got lucky. Unknown. Watch your back. Malcolm exhaled slowly, locked his phone, and set it face down on his desk. Not unexpected, not even surprising. But now he had a choice to make. Let this go, pretend it never happened, or make sure Ryan and everyone else understood exactly who he was. Because whatever happened next, it was coming. By Thursday morning, everything felt different. Before Malcolm even stepped inside the school, he could tell. The sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped the second he walked past. By the time he reached his locker, 2 freshmen had already darted out of his way. A junior he didn't even know gave him an approving nod. And then there were the ones who suddenly wanted to be his friend. Yo, right. You really put Calloway on his ass, huh? Dude, I heard you barely even touched him. He just dropped like a sack of bricks. Bro, you got hands like that and you don't even talk. That's cold, man. Malcolm ignored most of it. Because this wasn't respect. This was entertainment. They weren't looking at him like a person. They were looking at him like a spectacle. A rumor come to life. And that's when he saw Ryan, standing by the main entrance. But something had changed. The usual cocky smirk. Gone. The easy confidence. Missing. Instead, Ryan stood stiff, his fists clenched at his sides. He wasn't alone. Zach and Brandon flanked him, just like always. But now, they weren't laughing. Ryan met Malcolm's gaze for half a second. Then he looked away. Malcolm almost smirked. Almost. But he knew better than to think Ryan had given up. Guys like him didn't just accept a loss. They waited for a rematch. Lunch was worse. Malcolm could feel it before he even sat down. The air in the cafeteria was thick with expectation. People were watching him like they were waiting for something to happen. Like they thought Ryan might storm across the room for round 2. But Ryan wasn't even in the cafeteria. His usual table was empty. Malcolm had just started eating when someone sat across from him. Not one of Ryan's guys. Avenue She set her drink down and studied him for a second. Then she said, So, you ready for what's next? Malcolm chewed his food, swallowed, then raised an eyebrow. You tell me. Ava smirked. Look, I know how this works. You embarrassed Ryan. He's not gonna take that lying down, but he's also not gonna do something stupid. Not yet. She leaned forward slightly. Just be careful. Ryan's dad has been talking to the school board. You think he's gonna let this slide? Malcolm met her gaze, steady, unfazed. Let him try. Ava exhaled, shaking her head. You really don't care, do you? Malcolm shrugged. I didn't start this. She tilted her head. Yeah, but you ended it. That's worse. She stood up, picking up her tray. Just watch your back. Then she walked away. And for the first time since Friday, Malcolm felt something he hadn't before. Not anger, not annoyance, curiosity. Because whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be another cafeteria fight. Malcolm knew Ryan wasn't done. The way he had walked out of the principal's office, his fists clenched, his face tight with embarrassment, Malcolm had seen that look before. Ryan Calloway wasn't the type to take a loss and move on. No, he was waiting. For what, Malcolm wasn't sure yet, but he could feel it, like a storm rolling in before the first crack of thunder. The thing about guys like Ryan, they didn't just lose. They made sure that when they got even, it counted. By the time lunch rolled around, Malcolm could already feel the shift in the air. He moved through the cafeteria, tray in hand, eyes sweeping the room. His usual spot near the back was open. He headed there, sitting down without hesitation. Conversations swirled around him, but something was different. Ryan wasn't at his usual table, neither were Zach or Brandon. Instead, Malcolm saw them standing by the vending machines, their backs turned toward the room as they spoke in hushed tones. He didn't have to hear what they were saying to know it was about him. He had made Ryan look weak. That wasn't something Ryan was going to let slide. Malcolm exhaled, shaking his head. This was getting old. And then, "Mind if I sit?" Malcolm looked up. Ava Sinclair. She was standing across from him, tray in hand, expression unreadable. Malcolm didn't answer right away. He glanced toward Ryan's table again. Still empty. Ava raised an eyebrow. "It's just a seat, right? I'm not here to start a war." He gestured toward the chair. "Do what you want." She sat, taking a sip from her water bottle before setting it down. "So, Calloway's dad really thought he could get you expelled, huh?" Malcolm picked up his fork, stabbing at his food. "Yeah, thought he had it in the bag too." Ava smirked. "I bet he did. Guys like Ryan, they don't think the rules apply to them, and when something doesn't go their way, they call Daddy to fix it." Malcolm didn't respond. She studied him for a moment. "You're not worried?" Malcolm glanced at her. "About what?" Ava set her tray down. "Oh, come on. You embarrassed him, humiliated him, and worse, you did it in a way he can't spin. He's not going to take that lightly." Malcolm chewed his food, swallowed. "I know. And what?" Ava leaned forward slightly. "And what are you going to do about it?" Malcolm met her gaze. "Depends on what he does first." Ava exhaled, shaking her head. "See, that's what worries me. Ryan's not dumb. He's not just going to walk up and try to fight you again. He's going to make sure that whatever he does, it's something you can't fight back against." Malcolm didn't answer right away. Because she was right. Ryan wasn't looking for round two. He was looking for revenge. By last period, Malcolm found out how. The text messages started flooding in while he was walking to class. At first, he ignored them. But then his phone buzzed again and again, the notifications piling up so fast that he finally pulled it from his pocket. When he saw what was being sent to him, his stomach went cold. A screenshot. A fake conversation between him and another student, heavily edited. In the fake messages, Malcolm was threatening someone, talking about how he was going to make Ryan pay, saying things that sounded violent, reckless. It didn't matter that he had never sent them. The damage was already done. His pulse hammered as more messages came in, some from people he didn't even know. What the hell is this? Bro, did you really say this? Dude, you're in deep S. Malcolm felt his jaw tighten. This was it. Ryan knew he couldn't beat him physically, so he was trying to destroy his reputation instead. Malcolm had been at Redwood High for less than 2 weeks. Now his name was being dragged through the dirt in real time. And if he didn't get ahead of this fast, he was going to lose everything. Ava caught up with him after school. "I saw it." Malcolm exhaled, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Yeah, so did half the school." She frowned. "It's fake, right?" He shot her a look. She held up her hands. "Just making sure. Because if Ryan is going this far, you need to be careful." "I know." She crossed her arms. "So what's your plan?" He stared ahead, thinking. He could go to the principal, but he already knew how that conversation would go. Unless you have proof, there's nothing we can do. Ryan was smart. He wouldn't have made those texts himself. He probably had someone else do it, someone who couldn't be tied back to him. But Malcolm had one advantage. Ryan was too cocky for his own good, and Malcolm was going to use that against him. That night, he started working. He spent hours digging, looking through old messages, old posts, anything that could prove Ryan had set this up. Then, just after midnight, he found it. Buried deep in a Reddit thread, a username he recognized. One of Ryan's closest friends, bragging about how he had helped a friend edit some really convincing screenshots. Malcolm took a screenshot of it. Then, just for good measure, he found the original texts Ryan had used. From months ago, messages completely unrelated to him. Ryan had taken them, cut them apart, rewritten them, and sent them out like they were fact. Malcolm exhaled slowly. He had proof now. And tomorrow, Ryan Calloway was going to regret every second of this. By the time Malcolm walked into school the next morning, the damage had already been done. His name was everywhere. Students weren't just whispering anymore. They were staring. Some barely hid their smirks. Others looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure whether to believe the rumors or not. Ryan's plan had worked. For now. Malcolm moved through the hallway, calm, controlled, his mind running through every possible move he could make next. He wasn't worried. He had proof. But proof didn't mean anything if people weren't willing to listen. And at Redwood High, Ryan owned the narrative. For now. His first real problem came in second period, Mr. Larson's class. Malcolm had just taken his seat when the door swung open and Coach Reynolds stepped inside. Everyone in the room went quiet. Coach Reynolds wasn't just any teacher. He was Redwood's football coach, the same football team Ryan played for, the same team that didn't lose. Reynolds' eyes swept across the room before landing on Malcolm. Right. You're coming with me? Malcolm set his pen down, met the man's gaze, and stood. This was happening sooner than he expected. Good. He followed Reynolds into the hallway, aware that every student in that classroom was going to be talking about this for the rest of the day. When they reached the athletic department office, Reynolds finally turned to face him. You want to explain to me what the hell is going on? Malcolm leaned against the doorframe. Not really. Reynolds' jaw tensed. Don't play dumb, right? Those messages you sent, the threats, that isn't something we take lightly. Malcolm stared at him. I didn't send them. Reynolds folded his arms. You expect me to believe that? Malcolm pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and held it out. You don't have to. Just read. Reynolds hesitated. Then he took the phone. And for the next 30 seconds he read. The original messages. The proof that the screenshots had been edited. The Reddit post from one of Ryan's friends, bragging about how he had helped fake them. Malcolm didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Reynolds' face darkened as he scrolled. Finally, he exhaled and passed the phone back. You got all this yourself? Yeah. Reynolds ran a hand over his face, looking tired. Malcolm watched him carefully. This was the moment. This was where Reynolds had to make a choice. Back Ryan, his star quarterback, and let Malcolm take the fall. Or do the right thing. When Reynolds finally spoke, his voice was quieter. You take this to Jennings yet? Not yet. Figured I'd see what you'd do first. Reynolds sighed. Jennings won't be able to ignore this. I know. Reynolds nodded, thinking. Then, to Malcolm's surprise, he pulled out his own phone and started typing. Malcolm watched as he forwarded the proof to the school administration. Then he met Malcolm's gaze again. This doesn't mean I like you. Malcolm smirked. Didn't think it did. Reynolds shook his head. Get out of here. And write. Malcolm paused. Reynolds' expression was unreadable. You're gonna want to watch your back after this. Malcolm nodded. Yeah, I figured. And then he walked out. Ryan wasn't just going to lose. He was going to lose in front of everyone. The announcement came during third period. Attention, students. Ryan Calloway, please report to the main office immediately. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Heads turned. Students whispered. Malcolm kept his face neutral, but inside, he knew exactly what was happening. By lunchtime, everyone knew. Ryan had been pulled into a meeting with the principal, the athletic department, and his father. No one knew what had been said. But when Ryan finally walked into the cafeteria, his face was set in stone-cold fury. Students moved out of his way. He was looking for someone, and Malcolm already knew who. Ryan spotted him instantly. Then, without a word, he started walking straight toward him. The cafeteria went silent. Malcolm sighed and set his tray down. Ryan's voice was low, dangerous. You think this is funny? Malcolm tilted his head. I don't know. You tell me. You're the one who just got dragged into the office. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. You think this is over? Malcolm exhaled. Ryan, if you had just let it go, none of this would have happened, but you had to fake some messages. Get your dad involved. Make it a whole thing. Ryan stepped closer, and that's when Malcolm leaned in. I want you to listen real carefully, Malcolm said, voice calm, controlled. This is the last time I let you pull something like this. Ryan's nostrils flared. Or what? Malcolm smiled, and then, without looking away, he lifted his phone. Ryan's glare faltered. Malcolm tapped the screen, and then the audio started playing. Ryan's own voice, a recording, from last week, bragging about how he was going to ruin Malcolm, about how his dad would make sure Malcolm never set foot in this school again. Ryan went pale. Malcolm tucked his phone back into his pocket. Like I said, let it go. For the first time, Ryan looked unsure. He didn't say another word, didn't try to throw a punch. He just stood there, fists shaking at his sides, with the entire cafeteria watching. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned and walked away. Malcolm sat back down and picked up his fork. His appetite was suddenly a lot better. That afternoon, Malcolm was called into the office. Jennings was waiting for him, expression hard to read. You handled that well, Jennings said. Malcolm shrugged. Not my first time dealing with guys like him. Jennings studied him. Ryan's father isn't happy. Yeah, neither am I. Jennings let out a slow breath. I want to be clear with you, Wright. You're in the right here, but people like Daniel Calloway, they don't lose quietly. Malcolm met his gaze. Neither do I. Jennings was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. You're free to go. Malcolm stood, heading for the door. And Wright? He paused. Jennings leaned forward. This isn't over. Malcolm gave him a small, knowing smile. I know. And then he walked out. As Malcolm left school that day, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Malcolm exhaled slowly, locked the screen, and slipped the phone into his pocket. He had won this round. But Ryan Calloway? Ryan was about to get desperate. And that was when people got dangerous. Malcolm knew Ryan was going to try something. It wasn't a question of if, but when. And after the way Ryan had walked out of the cafeteria, humiliated in front of everyone, Malcolm had no doubt that whatever came next was going to be bigger, nastier, and way more calculated. Guys like Ryan didn't act on impulse when they were cornered. They plotted. Malcolm had to be ready. The first sign of trouble came on Monday morning. He had barely stepped inside the school when he noticed the shift in the air. It wasn't just the stares anymore, it was the smirks, the low murmurs that stopped just as he walked by. Malcolm ignored it, moving toward his locker. But the second he turned the corner, he stopped short. His locker was wide open, and inside it was trashed, papers torn, books soaked with some kind of dark liquid, his gym bag slashed open. But what really caught his eye? The note, taped to the inside of the door. "You don't belong here. Leave while you still can." Malcolm exhaled slowly, his fingers curling into fists. He wasn't surprised. He expected something like this. He just didn't expect it so soon. A voice spoke behind him. "Damn, man, that's messed up." Malcolm turned. Zach Reynolds, Ryan's right-hand man. Zach leaned against the lockers, arms crossed, smirk just a little too pleased. "Looks like someone's not a fan of yours." Malcolm didn't react. "You?" Zach held up his hands, all mock innocence. "Me? Nah, man. I don't have time for this kind of thing." "Right." Zach tilted his head, smirk widening. "Then again, neither does Ryan." Malcolm studied him, silent. Zach chuckled. "You think you won, don't you?" Malcolm didn't answer. Zach leaned in slightly. "Ryan's dad is pissed. Do you really think this ends with some detention or a slap on the wrist? That family doesn't take losses. Ever." Malcolm finally spoke. "Then maybe they should get used to it." Zach's smirk faltered just for a second. Then he straightened. "Enjoy the rest of your day, Mercer." He walked off, leaving Malcolm staring at his destroyed locker. Ryan wasn't done. Not even close. By lunch, Malcolm had pieced it together. This wasn't just about his locker. It was about isolating him. Ryan wasn't trying to fight him anymore. He was trying to turn the school against him. The fake text messages had been step 1. Trashing his locker was step 2. Malcolm had seen it before. When guys like Ryan couldn't beat you physically, they did everything they could to tear you down from the inside. And the worst part? It was working. People who had nodded at him last week suddenly looked the other way. People who had laughed at Ryan when he hit the cafeteria floor now kept their distance. Ryan was rebuilding his power step by step. And Malcolm, he was being boxed in. That afternoon, Malcolm found Ava waiting for him outside the library. She was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching him carefully. "How bad is it?" Malcolm asked. Ava sighed. "Bad. Ryan's got people spreading stories about you, saying you got violent in your last school, that you got kicked out for fighting." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "That's a lie." Ava shrugged. "Doesn't matter. People love a good story, and Ryan's giving them one." Malcolm exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Anything else?" Ava hesitated. "There's a rumor that someone's going to jump you after school." Malcolm's head lifted. "Who?" Ava shook her head. "No names, but it's supposed to be off-school property, where there aren't any cameras." Malcolm nodded slowly. Ryan was done playing fair, if he ever had been. Malcolm wasn't an idiot. He wasn't about to walk into an ambush just because someone wanted to set him up. So, when the last bell rang, he took a different exit. He moved fast, staying out of sight, using side hallways and back doors. And sure enough, as he reached the parking lot, he saw them. 4 guys, standing by the bleachers near the football field, waiting. Malcolm's stomach tightened. He recognized 2 of them. Brandon and Zach. Ryan wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. Cowards like Ryan didn't get their hands dirty, but Malcolm knew exactly what this was. They wanted to jump him. Make sure he didn't walk away this time. Malcolm could have walked the other way, could have avoided the fight entirely. But that wasn't who he was. He had spent his whole life not backing down. And today wasn't going to be any different. He walked toward them, calm, controlled. Brandon was the first to notice. He nudged Zach. Zach turned, saw Malcolm coming straight toward them, and grinned. Well, Look who finally showed up. Malcolm stopped a few feet away. Wasn't planning on it, but I figured I'd save you the trouble of waiting all day. Brandon cracked his knuckles, cocky for someone who's about to get their ass kicked. Malcolm tilted his head. That right? Zach's smirk widened. Yeah, that's right. And then he swung first. Malcolm saw it coming. He moved fast, ducking under the punch, grabbing Zach's wrist in one clean motion. Before Zach could even react, Malcolm twisted, flipping him over onto the pavement. Zach hit the ground hard, gasping. Brandon lunged. Malcolm turned, sidestepping, letting Brandon's momentum carry him forward. Then, he slammed an elbow into Brandon's ribs, knocking the wind out of him. The other two guys hesitated. Malcolm straightened, adjusting his bag. Anyone else? Silence. Brandon groaned, clutching his stomach. Zach was still struggling to get up. Malcolm exhaled. Good. Tell Ryan I'm done playing his game. And then he walked away. Not running, not hurrying, just walking. Because he had just made something very clear. Ryan didn't own this school. Not anymore. As Malcolm left, his phone buzzed. A text from Ava. So, how bad was it? Malcolm smirked, texting back. Could have been worse. But trust me, Ryan's not gonna like what happens next, because now Malcolm was going to end this. Once and for all. Ryan Calloway had officially lost control. The way he stormed into school the next morning, shoulders tight, jaw clenched, made it clear. He wasn't the top dog anymore. His friends knew it. The school knew it. And worst of all, he knew it. Malcolm could see the frustration boiling under Ryan's skin, threatening to explode. Ryan had spent years being untouchable, running this place, having everyone bow to him, either out of fear or because they wanted to be close to his power. But now people were looking at Malcolm instead. Ryan wasn't used to that. And the worst kind of enemy? One who has nothing left to lose. Malcolm sat in first period, eyes focused on the board, but his mind was elsewhere. Ryan was running out of options, which meant he was going to make a mistake. Malcolm just had to be ready when he did. His phone buzzed under his desk. Ava, Calloway's boiling over. Watch your back. Malcolm exhaled, slipping his phone into his pocket. Yeah, he already knew. By lunchtime, the tension in the cafeteria was thick. Ryan sat at his usual table, but something was different. The usual arrogance was missing. The constant laughter from his friends had been replaced with low, muttered conversations. Malcolm didn't sit down. He grabbed his food and leaned against the far wall, watching, waiting. Ava slid next to him, crossing her arms. This feels like the part in a movie where something explodes. Malcolm took a sip of his drink. Then let's see who lights the fuse. And then it happened. Ryan stood, shoving his chair back. The cafeteria went silent. He didn't look at Malcolm, didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he turned to Jennings, the principal, who had just walked in. Ryan strode over, talking in low, serious tones. Jennings frowned, listening. Malcolm's stomach tightened. Ava murmured, "That's not good." It wasn't, because Ryan wasn't fighting anymore. He was going nuclear. 5 minutes later, Malcolm's name was called over the intercom. Malcolm Wright, report to the principal's office immediately. The whole cafeteria stared at him. Ryan sat back down, arms crossed, face unreadable. Ava cursed under her breath. What now? Malcolm didn't answer. He just grabbed his bag and headed for the door. Jennings' office was tense when Malcolm walked in. Ryan and his father were already there. Jennings sat behind his desk, his expression a mix of exhaustion and frustration. Ryan's father, Daniel Calloway, turned, his face stone cold. "Sit," Jennings said. Malcolm sat, calm, steady. Jennings let out a slow breath. "We have a problem." Malcolm didn't respond. He knew better than to speak first in situations like this. Jennings continued. Mr. Calloway has provided new information about you. Information that, if true, puts you in a serious situation. Malcolm's face didn't change, but his stomach twisted. Daniel Calloway leaned forward, voice calm, calculated. We received an anonymous tip that you've been involved in fights outside of school. Not just here, but back in Atlanta. Malcolm's pulse pounded. That was a lie. Jennings hesitated. There's a report filed in your previous school, a record of disciplinary actions. Malcolm's mind raced. He had never been suspended for fighting. Ever. Ryan sat there, silent, watching, his expression smug. Malcolm exhaled. I want to see the report. Jennings slid a folder across the desk. Take a look yourself. Malcolm opened it. And there it was. A fabricated disciplinary record. His name, his actual school ID number. But the details, completely fake. Suspended for fighting, expelled from his last school, considered a threat to students. Malcolm clenched his jaw. This was beyond personal now. This was character assassination. Ryan had taken his father's connections and fabricated official school records. Jennings studied him. I have to take this seriously, Malcolm. Malcolm looked up. His voice was cold, sharp. Then take it seriously. Jennings frowned. Excuse me? Malcolm closed the folder, tapping the cover. Call my old school. Ask them yourself. Silence. Daniel Calloway's expression shifted ever so slightly, because he hadn't expected that. Jennings studied Malcolm, then picked up the phone. Dialed. Malcolm didn't look away from Ryan. Didn't blink. Ryan's fingers twitched against his chair. The call rang. Picked up. Jennings spoke. Yes, this is Principal Jennings from Redwood High. I need to verify a student record for a Malcolm Wright. He paused, listened. Then his entire face changed. Malcolm's heart pounded, but he didn't show it. Jennings nodded slowly. I see. No disciplinary record at all. Ryan's jaw clenched. Jennings' eyes flicked toward Calloway. No fights? No suspensions? Daniel Calloway shifted, his confidence starting to crack. Jennings listened a little longer, then sighed. Thank you for your time. He hung up, and when he turned back to Malcolm, he looked pissed. That was a lie. Ryan tensed. Jennings turned to Calloway. Your source falsified school records, Daniel. That's a serious accusation, and I don't take well to being played. Malcolm didn't smirk, didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because this wasn't about fighting anymore. This was about fraud, corruption, and for the first time, Jennings saw it too. Daniel Calloway stood, adjusting his jacket. I was simply passing along concerns. If there was a misunderstanding, then Jennings held up a hand. We're done here. Ryan shot to his feet. He still attacked me. Jennings cut him off. Sit. Down. Ryan froze, and for the first time in his entire life, Malcolm watched Ryan Calloway obey an order. Jennings exhaled. This conversation is over. Malcolm, you're free to go. Malcolm stood. Ryan looked like he wanted to explode. Malcolm turned toward the door, but just before stepping out, he glanced back. Ryan's eyes burned with rage. But Daniel Calloway? He looked at his son with thinly veiled disappointment, like Ryan had failed him. That was a bigger loss than anything Malcolm could have planned. As Malcolm walked out, his phone buzzed. A text. Ava. I don't know what just happened in that office, but Ryan looks like he just got kicked off his throne. Malcolm smiled, because he wasn't just winning the fight anymore. He was winning the war. Malcolm knew Ryan wasn't done. Even after the meeting with Jennings, even after his father had looked at him like a failure, even after the entire school had started whispering about how Ryan Calloway wasn't as untouchable as he thought. Guys like Ryan didn't know how to lose. They only knew how to escalate. By the time lunch rolled around, the shift in the air was impossible to ignore. Ryan hadn't been in any of his morning classes. His usual table was empty. And yet, Malcolm could feel him everywhere. It was like the school was waiting for something to happen. Malcolm sat at his usual spot, taking a slow bite of his food. Ava slid into the seat across from him, dropping her tray with a thud. "You feel that?" she asked. Malcolm nodded. "Yeah?" Ava exhaled, scanning the room. "He's planning something. I don't know what yet, but whatever it is, it's gonna be bad." Malcolm didn't answer right away. He glanced around the cafeteria, noting the subtle shifts. The people who usually laughed at Ryan's jokes were suddenly quiet, uneasy. Ryan's power was slipping, and everyone could feel it. "Let him try," Malcolm finally said. Ava frowned. "You sure about that?" Malcolm met her gaze, his voice steady. "He's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet." Ava studied him for a moment, then smirked. "You're scary sometimes, you know that." Malcolm just kept eating. And then the doors slammed open. Ryan walked in like a man with nothing left to lose. He wasn't alone. Zach and Brandon flanked him, but they weren't grinning like usual. They looked tense, like they weren't sure if they should even be here. Ryan's eyes locked onto Malcolm instantly. Malcolm didn't move, didn't react. He just set his fork down, calmly, deliberately. The cafeteria fell into absolute silence. Ryan strode forward, his steps too controlled, his movements too stiff, like he was barely keeping himself from exploding. He stopped just short of Malcolm's table. "You think this is over?" Ryan's voice was low, barely above a whisper. Malcolm tilted his head. "I think you're out of moves." Ryan's jaw clenched. "You don't belong here," he spat. Malcolm exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "That all you got?" Ryan's fists trembled at his sides. "You ruined everything," Ryan hissed. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, calm, collected. "No, Ryan, you did that all by yourself." A flicker of hesitation crossed Ryan's face. Because deep down, he knew it was true, but instead of admitting it, instead of walking away, Ryan made his final mistake. He grabbed Malcolm's tray and flipped it. Food went flying. Drinks spilled over the table. The cafeteria gasped in shock. And for the first time since this all started, Malcolm moved first, not violently, not angrily, just fast. Before Ryan could even blink, Malcolm was on his feet, and then he grabbed Ryan by the collar and spun him around. Ryan barely had time to react before he was slammed against the nearest table. Malcolm leaned in, voice low, even, terrifyingly calm. "You don't get to control the story anymore, Ryan." Ryan struggled, but Malcolm's grip was firm. "You lost. Everyone sees it. Everyone knows it." Malcolm's voice dropped even lower. "And you know what's worse?" Ryan's breath hitched. Malcolm smirked. "You can't do a damn thing about it." Ryan's face turned red with rage, his body tensed, ready to fight. But Malcolm just let him go. Ryan stumbled, catching himself on the table. He looked wild, desperate, cornered. And that's when it finally hit him. Malcolm wasn't afraid of him. Never had been. Never would be. Ryan's chest heaved, his fists curled and uncurled, and then he did something no one expected. He turned and ran. The cafeteria exploded. Whispers, shouts, laughter. Malcolm sat back down, exhaling. Ava stared at him like he had just unlocked a cheat code for life. "Okay," she breathed, shaking her head. "That was actually terrifying." Malcolm just took a sip of his drink. Ryan Calloway was done. He just hadn't figured it out yet. But tomorrow he would. Ryan Calloway didn't show up to school the next day, or the day after that. By the end of the week, the rumors had reached every hallway, every classroom, every locker in Redwood High. Some people said his father had pulled him out of school, too embarrassed to let him face the fallout. Others whispered that Ryan had snapped after Malcolm humiliated him in the cafeteria, that he'd tried to fight his dad, tried to argue his way out of the mess he had made, and lost. Malcolm didn't care which version was true, because, in the end, Ryan was gone, and for the first time since he had walked through these doors, Malcolm could finally breathe. The shift in the school was immediate. Ryan had ruled with fear, and now that fear was gone. Malcolm could see it in the way students moved, in the way conversations flowed more freely, in the way certain people who had been too scared to speak up before finally found their voices. It wasn't just about Ryan losing. It was about the system he had built collapsing around him. And Malcolm, he had torn it down brick by brick. But the thing about power, it always tries to find a new home. At lunch, Malcolm sat in his usual spot, eating in silence. Ava slid into the chair across from him, setting her tray down with a smirk. "So," she said, popping a fry into her mouth, "how does it feel?" Malcolm didn't look up. "How does what feel?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "You know what?" He took a slow sip of his drink. "Feels like I can eat lunch in peace," Ava scoffed. "Come on, Malcolm. Ryan's gone. People are treating you like some kind of legend. You're walking around here like a king, and you don't feel even a little satisfied." Malcolm set his cup down, meeting her gaze. "I didn't do this to be a king." Ava studied him for a second, then nodded. "Good answer." They ate in silence for a while. Then Ava leaned forward, her voice quieter. "You know someone else is going to try to take his place, right?" Malcolm exhaled. "Yeah." Ryan was just one head of the snake. Someone would step up. Maybe Zach. Maybe some other rich kid with a daddy complex. Malcolm had fought his whole life to prove himself, to stand his ground. This wasn't new. It was just another battlefield. Ava smirked. "What do you think happens next?" Malcolm took another bite of his food, chewed, swallowed. "Guess we'll find out." By Friday, it was official. Ryan wasn't coming back. His father had transferred him to a private school across the city, far enough that no one at Redwood would ever see him again. It was over. And yet, Malcolm knew his fight wasn't done. Because what happened to him? What happened to every kid like him who got pushed around, underestimated, set up to fail? It wasn't just about one bully. It was about the system that let guys like Ryan get away with it for so long. And Malcolm, he wasn't about to let that happen again. That night, Malcolm sat at his desk, staring at an empty notebook. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't planning his next move in a fight. He was planning something bigger, something that would last. Because if he could take down Ryan, if he could change the way things worked at Redwood, then maybe, just maybe, he could do more. He picked up his pen and started writing. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had to prove yourself when you shouldn't have had to, if you've ever fought back against people who thought they could break you, this story is for you. Hit subscribe. Let them know you're still standing.